I remember the day everything tipped like a cheap phone dropped from a high ledge, slow, bitter, then the sudden, awful silence when it hit concrete. For 7 years, I'd trusted Mira with the small, sacred architecture of a life, the mortgage, the grocery lists, the way we learned to fold towels so they fit in the linen closet. She was restless in ways I mistook for ambition, long hours at the marketing firm, late nights editing decks, a charm that made colleagues favor her for collaborations. When the truth came, it arrived like bad weather, relentless and precise. I discovered the affair, as these things often do, by accident. A calendar alert on her laptop that wasn't for work. A forwarded hotel confirmation hidden under a travel folder. Then, the text thread, warm, elliptical, affectionate in a language that had not been meant for me. The other man was Arjun, an entrepreneur we'd once toasted at a rooftop party, a handsome presence who had built a small chain of boutique cafés and liked to talk about scaling. He was everything Mira found intoxicating. Risk, attention, the kind of confidence that could be mistaken for love. They met quietly often. In the city's neutral places, hotel bars, midweek getaways, the kind of detachment that makes people think an affair is a private hobby rather than the theft of a life. I didn't explode. I didn't make a scene. I collected. I wanted the story to be factual and unarguable because I had learned the hard way that love desperately wants to forgive and people desperate to conceal will rewrite history with practiced hands. I hired a private investigator, saved messages, gathered receipts. The evidence was a tidy, cruel dossier, timestamps, booked rooms, photos of them leaving the same addresses at odd hours. Confrontation felt theatrical and unsatisfying. I wanted real consequences. I wanted a reset that would remove the easy comforts Mira had been leaning on. When I told her I wanted a separation, she laughed, bitter and sure she could repair the leak with tears. She argued. She promised. She said she'd end it, that it had only been a lapse, that Arjun meant nothing. But the calculus of infidelity is stubborn. Once you invert the trust, the numbers never add up the same, she begged. She promised counseling. She said we could rebuild. I filed for divorce calmly and deliberately and asked for legal protections for my share of our assets and full custody arrangements for the kids I loved more than anything else in the world. The lawyer moved like a machine, shifting finances into accounts and safeguarding what I needed for stability. I did not want to be poor because of someone else's recklessness. Then life did one of those stupid spins movies rarely bother to invent. Arjun's cafés, hyper-leveraged and dependent on a single investor's goodwill, collapsed. A supplier lawsuit, a missed payroll, and the investors pulled out. Overnight, the shiny startup aura evaporated into bankruptcy filings and phone calls from collectors. Arjun's brand that had once promised expansion became a cautionary headline. He was ruined in the way men who chase risk sometimes are, fast, absolute, and messy. News of his downfall reached us in the most mundane way, an alert on my feed, then a call from a mutual acquaintance, then Mira's face shrinking when she read the article at breakfast. She came to me that day, not with the usual angry defenses, but with a new kind of panic. "Can we talk?" she asked, voice small. She stood in our kitchen with the same posture she'd used the day she confessed a crush on a band years ago, the old Mira I thought I knew. Arjun's bankruptcy had stripped him of the power that had fed their love story, the illusion of escape. Without his glossy promise of risk and riches, Mira looked not like a villain, but like someone who had traded long-term steadiness for a short-term thrill that had gone bankrupt. She begged me to take her back, to consider that now he was gone she realized the mistake she'd made. Her eyes were a cocktail of guilt and calculation, and I recognized both. Beggars, as the proverb goes, cannot be choosers, but I had choices. I had chosen to protect myself and my children from further instability, so I listened. I watched the way she flinched when she thought I might relent. She apologized with the exhaustion of someone who'd run out of options. She said she'd end it with Arjun, as if the mere absence of his fortune made erasing the memory possible. She promised therapy, transparency, a lifetime of proof. She even offered to sign a pre-agreed contract to stipulate conditions under which reconciliation could happen. I sat with that offer like a surgeon examining a limb. My revenge, if you want to call it revenge, was clinical and patient. I didn't shout her infidelities from the rooftops, and I didn't wait for public humiliation to lessen her. I made choices that would matter beyond the immediate sting. I secured the children's future first. With Arjun's collapse, the legal team I'd retained highlighted something I had known but not fully leveraged: her financial entanglement with him. There were transfers, expensive nights charged to his business cards, shared reservations that mirrored a lifestyle financed by leverage. I used this in negotiations, not to humiliate, but to make sure stability would belong to the children, not to a woman whose appetite for risk had cost their household equilibrium. She came back to our kitchen nightly, begging, sobbing, waving the small, brittle flag of contrition. I heard her. I told her I would consider reopening the door under very specific conditions. The terms I proposed read like a legalist's heart: full financial transparency, immediate separation of any joint funds, a binding counseling schedule with documented progress, no contact with Arjun past a clearly defined line, and an enforceable probation period with clear consequences. It was not cruelty. It was a shield. If she wanted to return, the return had to be honest and meticulously documented, because the past had taught me once truth was optional, it would be optional again. When I presented the terms, she tried bargaining. She offered grand gestures instead of documents: weekend trips, a promise to quit her job, vows to change. I listened and then pushed forward with the contract I had prepared with my lawyer. She faltered, then agreed somewhat reluctantly. She wanted her old life back. So did I, my old life minus the deceit. I thought the structure would work. Binding consequences for non-compliance would remove the romanticized notion that love should be all forgiveness and no accountability. But the thing about revenge that hides inside righteous caution is that it can turn into something else, a test. She failed that test spectacularly. She took one step onto the straight path, then a misstep turned into a stumble, and the old habits reasserted themselves. Text messages appeared again, small at first, then long, then secretive. She lied about meetings, about a late-night group workshop that matched a pattern we'd seen before. When the evidence mounted a second time, the contract I had insisted upon did exactly what it was meant to do. It provided a legal framework that made bargaining impossible. The consequences I'd insisted on were enforced. The second betrayal dissolved any chance of reconciliation. There was a moment, not catharsis, not triumph, but something more plain, when I realized this wasn't about me wanting to get back at someone who'd hurt me. It was about refusing to be the safety net that allowed recklessness to repeat. I walked away with what mattered most: custody arrangements that kept the children's lives stable, financial settlements that made sure they would not inherit chaos, and the clean legal closure that prevents easy myths of romantic comeback. Mira walked away with the bitter fruit of a choice that had once seemed thrilling, but had now calcified into loss. A reputation damaged among friends, the reality that her lover's promise had been smoke, and the consequences of trade-offs made when she should have been thinking of other people. Months later, I'd find small peace in the rhythm of ordinary mornings, making school lunches, driving to practice, watching two small lives which had nothing to do with the mess rebuild trust in tiny increments. Mira texted sometimes, soft and full of regret, but the contract and the court's terms made those texts harmless. They were echoes, not doors. People asked if I felt vindicated. I would say no. I felt pragmatic. Vindication tastes like ash. Stability tastes like coffee and school runs. The revenge I took was not public spectacle, but private armor. I used the fallout of Arjun's bankruptcy to ensure the children would be insulated from the fallout of adult recklessness, and I insisted that if Mira wanted back, it would be on terms that protected what I loved most. In the end, she begged. I provided structure, she betrayed again, and I closed the door for good. That was the last act of a life that had been shaken, the quiet folding of a chapter where the only applause I sought was the steady breath of safety for my kids.